The Nile shimmers under the afternoon sun, its waters thick with the scent of papyrus and the sweat of slaves hauling limestone for yet another temple. You're born into this world of gold and treachery, a princess of the Ptolemaic dynasty, where the family crest might as well be a snake eating its own tail. Your crib is gilded, your toys are imported, and your bedtime stories, oh, they're all about murder. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where the phrase "trust no one" isn't just good advice, it's survival. Your father, Ptolemy II, rules with the kind of smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He's a man who writes poetry about the stars, but wouldn't hesitate to drown his own brother in a vat of wine if it meant keeping the throne. And you're his daughter. That should mean safety, love, maybe even power. But in this palace, bloodlines are just another bargaining chip. Historians still argue whether Ptolemy II was a visionary or just a particularly cunning tyrant, but one thing's clear: he had a talent for turning family into political leverage. And you, little princess, are about to learn that the hard way. Fun fact, the Ptolemies loved their bling. Gold wasn't just for crowns, it lined their sandals, their chariots, even their toothpicks. But here's the quirky bit: they also believed crocodile dung made great sunscreen. Spoiler, it didn't. It just made you smell like a swamp. So as you toddle through the palace halls, clutching a doll stuffed with rare incense, remember this: you're being watched, measured, prepared. Because in Ptolemaic Egypt, childhood isn't a time of innocence, it's training for the games ahead. And trust us, you won't like the rules. The palace corridors echo with whispers as you grow older, the once distant murmur of court politics now sharpening into clarity. Your father, Ptolemy II, doesn't look at you with paternal warmth. No, his gaze is calculating, like a merchant weighing a shipment of spices. You are not his child, you are his asset, and in the cutthroat world of Hellenistic dynasties, even daughters have their price. By the time you're old enough to understand the word dynasty, you've already witnessed its consequences. Your aunt, the formidable Arsinoe of Egypt, yes, names get recycled here like last season's linens, was exiled for daring to disagree with your father's policies. One day she was at court, draped in silks. The next, she vanished like a mirage in the desert. The lesson: loyalty is demanded, not earned. And if you're lucky, disloyalty only gets you banished, not fed to the crocodiles. Historians still argue whether Ptolemy II was genuinely paranoid or just really good at anticipating betrayal. Either way, his strategy was clear: keep your enemies confused and your family terrified. And you're being groomed for a role, though no one's bothered to tell you what it is yet. Here's a mainstream historical fact to chew on. The Ptolemies were obsessed with maintaining pure Greek bloodlines, which, given the family's eventual habit of marrying siblings, is hilariously ironic. But here's the quirky tidbit: they also employed professional tasters, not just for food but for perfume. That's right, even your lavender oil had to pass the sniff test before touching royal skin. Safety first, even in decadence. So as you practice your Greek and perfect your posture, remember this: every skill you learn, languages, diplomacy, the art of the veiled threat, is just another stitch in the net your father is weaving around you. And nets, dear princess, are meant to trap. The scent of burning myrrh clings to the air as you watch your older sister Arsinoe I pack her belongings under armed guard. Her crime? Existing while married to your father's rival. One moment she's Queen of Thrace, the next she's being hustled onto a ship bound for exile in Upper Egypt, where the only thing thicker than the heat is the despair. You clutch your ivory hairpin a little tighter, realizing royal siblings don't just compete for attention, they play for keeps. Your father's court poets will later spin this as prudent statesmanship, but let's be real, Ptolemy II just turned family dinners into a contact sport. While you're still deciphering the difference between a diplomatic smile and a death threat, your sister's fate teaches you the first rule of survival: never be the weakest gazelle in the pride. Historians still argue whether Arsinoe I was genuinely plotting rebellion or just guilty of bad luck in the husband lottery. Here's a fun fact to ponder. The Ptolemies invented the original block list. Enemies' names were systematically chiseled off monuments, like some stone-carved version of cancel culture. And now for the quirky tidbit you'll wish you could unknow: court physicians prescribed crushed pearls for indigestion. That's right, when your stomach ached from all the palace intrigue, you'd slurp down a fortune in gemstones. Pro tip: peppermint tea works better and doesn't bankrupt the treasury. As the ship carrying your sister disappears beyond the Nile's bend, a slave adjusts your diadem with trembling hands. The gold feels heavier today. You're starting to understand, in this family, love is measured in military alliances, and trust is what happens between assassinations. The Aegean wind whips your veil against your face as the royal barge docks in Lysimachia, its marble piers crawling with soldiers whose armor gleams like disapproving frowns. Your new husband, King Lysimachus, stands waiting, a man whose wrinkles have wrinkles, whose battle stories predate the invention of your favorite perfume. The marriage contract signed while you were still playing with dolls might call this a strategic alliance, but let's be honest, you're basically a human peace treaty with better jewelry. At the wedding feast, your father toasts to eternal bonds between kingdoms, which translates to, I get Thrace's navy, you get my teenage daughter, everyone wins, except you, obviously. The wine tastes bitter, though that might just be the aftertaste of patriarchy. Historians still argue whether Lysimachus was a brilliant tactician or just really good at marrying heiresses. Mainstream history records he fathered over 20 children, which explains why he looks at you like you're his next tax revenue stream. But here's the quirky tidbit they don't teach in classrooms. His court astrologers dictated state policy based on goat entrails. That's right, your wedding night was scheduled around a liver spot on some dead animal's organs. As you're paraded through foreign streets under a hail of rose petals, remember this, royal weddings aren't about love, they're about plausible deniability when your father needs to invade next year. The bedchamber curtains are heavy with gold thread and the weight of expectations. The news arrives on a morning thick with the scent of olive trees and impending doom. Lysimachus is dead. Not the peaceful, surrounded by grandchildren kind of dead, but the messy battlefield spear through the chest variety. The courtiers scurry like roaches when the torches come out, suddenly very interested in pledging loyalty to, well, whoever seems likely to win. And you're now the most dangerous thing in the palace, a royal widow with a claim. His other wives, because of course there are other wives, eye you like a scorpion in their sandals. Queen Eurydice in particular keeps forgetting to have your food tasted. The servants whisper that she's already picked out the poison, arsenic or maybe hemlock, depending on what's in season. You start taking meals in your locked chambers, nibbling only what your most terrified handmaiden tastes first. Historians still argue whether Lysimachus's death was battle misfortune or convenient assassination. Mainstream records claim he fell heroically against Seleucid forces, but here's a quirky detail. His personal seer had allegedly warned him about death by a lion's hand, so the old king spent years avoiding big cats, only to be killed by a soldier whose shield bore a lion emblem. The gods do love their puns. As you burn his favorite cloak in the funeral pyre, and maybe enjoy the scent more than you should, a captain slips you a note. The harbor at moonrise. The ink smudges with your sweat. This is either escape or a trap. In your world, those are often the same thing. The smuggler's boat reeks of fish and desperation as you crouch beneath a tarp, every creak of the hull sounding like palace guards drawing their swords. When you finally stagger onto Egyptian soil weeks later, the Nile air smells different, thicker with perfume and paranoia. Your father's men find you within hours, of course. Ptolemy II doesn't lose track of his investments. His embrace at court feels like being wrapped in a cobra's coils. My daughter returns, he declares, fingers digging into your shoulders just a little too hard. The court erupts in applause, but you notice how his eyes linger on your waist, calculating your childbearing potential now that you're back on the market. The feast in your honor features roasted peacocks and musicians from Rhodes, but the wine pours suspiciously slowly near your cup. Historians still argue whether Ptolemy II genuinely missed his daughter or just saw a reclaimed political pawn. Mainstream records show he welcomed you with a lavish new title, Keeper of the Royal Bees. Sounds quaint until you learn the previous keeper was executed for stealing honey. Here's the quirky bit. Palace spies used beehives as listening devices, hollowing out hives to eavesdrop on garden conversations. Those buzzing workers, the original wiretaps. As you're shown to chambers 3 doors down from your father's, a slave girl slips you a honey cake, the kind your nurse baked when you were small. The taste floods you with memories of safety. Then you notice the faint bitter aftertaste. You spit it into a potted lotus as the girl watches, her face unreadable. The proposal comes wrapped in sacred hymns and the musky scent of temple incense, as if dressing a dagger in silk could make it less sharp. Your father's priests kneel before you, their shaved heads gleaming with sweat as they explain how the gods demand this union. A daughter marrying her father, a pharaoh claiming his own blood. The words slither through the chamber like serpents, coiling around your throat until breathing becomes an act of will. Ptolemy II watches from his throne, his face a mask of pious duty. He speaks of preserving the divine bloodline and honoring Isis and Osiris. Never mind that those gods were siblings, not father and daughter. The high priest produces an ancient scroll, its edges crumbling like dried blood. See, he wheezes, the sacred texts permit it. You wonder how much gold it cost him to add that passage. Historians still argue whether this was political genius or sheer madness. Mainstream records show the Ptolemies increasingly married siblings, but father-daughter unions remained rare even for them. Here's the quirky horror. Court astrologers claimed the stars aligned perfectly for the wedding because they'd been threatened with impalement if the constellations disagreed. When you whisper your consent, what choice do you have? The priests cheer like they've won a bet, which they probably have. As they drape you in bridal linen woven with golden vipers, you catch your reflection in a bronze mirror. A stranger stares back, her eyes already dead. The wedding night smells of myrrh and hypocrisy. The same priests who preach morality now chant hymns outside your chamber door, their voices rising and falling like the Nile's treacherous currents. The bed linens are Egyptian cotton, so fine it feels like spider webs against your skin, or maybe that's just the shudder you can't suppress. Your father-husband gods, even the term makes your stomach revolt, drinks wine slowly, watching you over the rim of his cup like a crocodile sizing up a gazelle at the riverbank. When he reaches for you, his signet ring catches the lamplight, the same ring that sealed your birth announcement 20 years prior. The irony isn't lost on you. Somewhere in the palace, a court poet is probably already composing verses about this divine union, his stylus scratching lies onto papyrus that will outlive your screams. Historians still argue whether the Ptolemaic incestuous marriages caused genetic consequences or if the family was just unlucky. Mainstream science confirms their later descendants suffered from increased stillbirths and health issues. But here's the darkly quirky detail. Royal physicians kept meticulous records of menstrual cycles and miscarriages, not out of concern but to calculate the optimal time to replace an infertile queen. As dawn stains the horizon the color of bruised flesh, you stare at the ceiling fresco of Nut, the sky goddess. Her star-studded body arches protectively over the earth. You wonder if she's laughing at you. The servants will arrive soon to collect the bridal sheets for inspection. You reach for the vial of oxblood hidden in your cosmetic box, the oldest trick in the book, but the priests need their proof. The coronation ceremony reeks of saffron and sweat as they place the double crown upon your head, its weight immediately lopsided like everything else in your life. You are now officially Queen Arsinoe II, co-ruler of Egypt, though the scribes make sure to carve Ptolemy II's name first on every decree. The priests anoint your forehead with oil that trickles down like tears you're forbidden to shed. When you rise from the throne to address the court, your new husband-father's hand accidentally brushes your hip. The nobles pretend not to notice. Your chambers now connect directly to Ptolemy's via a hidden passage, convenient for state affairs, horrifying for everything else. The servants call it the passage of divine union. You call it your private nightmare. At night you press a dagger under your pillow and a serving girl sleeps across your doorway. Neither makes you feel safer. Historians still argue whether you wielded any real power or were merely a glorified royal womb. Mainstream records show you sponsored temples and trading expeditions, but here's the telling detail. All your official portraits show you with Ptolemy's features, your individuality slowly erased like a palimpsest. Quirkily macabre fact, the palace employed professional facemakers who sculpted royal statues to subtly resemble whichever ruler currently held power, meaning your likeness probably started looking more like your father-husband by the year. When the court physician announces your pregnancy during a public banquet, the cheers shake the lotus-shaped lamps. Ptolemy toasts to the future of our divine bloodline, his smile showing too many teeth. You stare at the honeyed dates on your plate, counting the poisoned ones you've avoided so far. The child inside you kicks, whether in protest or solidarity, you can't tell. The palace physicians hover like vultures, their hands cold as they press against your swollen belly during the daily examinations. Every sip of your barley water is first tasted by a slave, not for poison, but for fertility potions mixed without your consent. The child inside you is no longer yours, it's a political contingency, a living treaty written in flesh and blood. When you wake gasping from nightmares, the midwives whisper that craving pickled fish means you'll birth a conqueror. You start refusing fish altogether. Ptolemy's gifts arrive with ominous frequency. a lapis lazuli amulet for healthy gestation, a Syrian slave girl trained in massage, a new bed with carvings of Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth. Each present feels like another chain. The most grotesque offering, a miniature sarcophagus for the afterbirth, lined with silver and inscribed with both your names. Even your placenta gets better accommodations than most citizens. Historians still argue whether Ptolemaic queens had any autonomy over their pregnancies. Mainstream medical scrolls from the era reveal chilling details, like using crocodile dung pessaries to induce labor. But here's the darkly quirky bit. Royal women were expected to give birth kneeling on bricks, mimicking the goddess Mescanet, while priests outside chanted spells to open the womb. Privacy wasn't included in the divine birth package. When the pains finally begin during a state banquet, Ptolemy orders the musicians to play louder so the foreign ambassadors won't hear your screams. As they carry you to the birthing bricks, you lock eyes with the Syrian slave. Her gaze holds neither pity nor malice, just the calm certainty of someone who's survived worse. You grip her hand like an anchor. The first wave of agony crashes over you, and for once the entire kingdom waits on your timing. The birth leaves you hollowed out, not just your body but your spirit. They place the squalling infant in your arms just long enough for the artist to sketch the official portrait, the divine family. Then the wet nurses whisk him away to a nursery guarded by eunuchs with curved blades. You're given exactly 40 days to recover before Ptolemy visits your chambers again, his eyes already assessing your waistline for the next blessed event. That night, you dream of setting the nursery on fire and fleeing into the desert. You wake clutching a oil lamp, your fingers trembling near the flame. Escape plans flicker through your mind like shadows on a tomb wall. There's the merchant from Cyprus who smuggles gems in wax tablets. He owes you for that harbor incident last summer. The Macedonian captain whose sister you saved from the textile mills might risk a midnight voyage. Even the Syrian slave girl slips you a vial of poppy extract for the pain, but you know its other uses. The dose that brings sleep could also bring silence, forever. Historians still argue whether Arsinoe ever attempted escape or simply accepted her gilded cage. Mainstream accounts focus on her temple donations, but here's the telling omission. Palace expenditure records show sudden purchases of reinforced golden manacles during this period. Quirky historical footnote: the Ptolemies employed professional dream interpreters who reported subjects' nightmares to the crown, meaning even your sleep wasn't private. When you finally approach the Cypriot merchant during a perfume sampling ceremony, his eyes dart to the guards. "The crocodiles are always hungry, Majesty," he murmurs, pressing a date into your palm. Inside the pit, not a gem but a single silver drachma, the ferryman's fee for the underworld. The message is clear. The child grows, not in your arms, but in the royal nursery, under the watchful eyes of eunuch guards and physicians who chart his weight gain like merchants tracking grain shipments. You're permitted visits twice monthly, always supervised, always ending with some priest's pointed comment about the queen's sacred duty to provide heirs. The first time your son calls the chief nurse mother, Ptolemy laughs uproariously and rewards the woman with gold bangles. That night, you shred your bedsheet with your teeth and bury the scraps beneath a floor tile. Rumors slither through the palace. A Cappadocian princess arrives for diplomatic studies. Read backup womb. Your handmaidens whisper that Ptolemy's been consulting oracles about the lifespan of queens who bear sickly children. Even the food tasters grow nervous. 3 disappear in as many weeks, replaced by stone-faced Nubians who refuse to meet your eyes. You start recognizing the particular click of sandals that means Ptolemy approaches. A gait that once meant father now screams predator. Historians still argue whether Arsinoe's later illnesses were natural or convenient. Mainstream medical texts from Alexandria describe her wasting condition with suspicious vagueness. But here's the macabre twist. The palace kept a royal bile ledger, documenting the color and consistency of rulers' vomit, and Arsinoe's entries suddenly mention black flecks like crushed beetles in her final months. When the Syrian slave presses a clay figurine into your hand, a crude Isis with her wings broken off, you finally understand. There will be no escape, no rebellion, only the long, slow poison of being erased. That night, you swallow half the poppy extract and dream of your sister's face in exile. For once, no one reports your dreams. The fever comes on like a sandstorm, first a dry whisper of heat behind your eyes, then the full scorching weight pressing you into the bed. The physicians murmur about imbalanced humors and Nile miasma, but their sideways glances tell the real story. Even dying is a political act in this palace. The child, your child, though they've never let you call him that, is brought in once to kiss your burning forehead. His lips feel cool, like the ghost of the motherhood you were never allowed to claim. Ptolemy visits daily, his perfumed beard failing to mask the scent of impatience. He speaks loudly of commissioning new temples in your honor, while his fingers tap out marching rhythms on your bedpost. The Syrian slave catches your eye as she changes the sweat-soaked linens. Her fingers briefly brush yours in silent complicity. That night, she brings unwatered wine and stays to help you drink it. The vintage tastes suspiciously of the poppy fields near Memphis. Historians still argue whether Arsinoe's death at age 45 was natural or state-sponsored. Mainstream records cite a sudden ugh, but here's the damning detail. The same physician who certified her death was later exiled for dosing errors. Quirky historical footnote: the Ptolemies mummified royal intestines separately in canopic jars, but Arsinoe's were mysteriously lost, along with any evidence of poison. As the darkness encroaches, you focus on the ceiling fresco where Nut's starry body arches over the earth. The goddess seems closer now, her outstretched hands almost within reach. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a dog howls, or maybe it's your sister, finally calling you home. The chisel bites into limestone with a sound like cracking bones as workers methodically erase your name from temple walls. Ptolemy's decree arrives before your body is even cold. All statues of you are to be updated with the features of his new wife, your own half-sister, because the Ptolemies really committed to the bit. The official mourning period lasts exactly 7 days, the same allotted for a prized hunting dog's passing. In the palace workshops, artisans melt down your jewelry to make votive offerings to yourself. The irony would be delicious if it weren't so bitterly tragic. Your son, now crown prince, is forbidden from attending your funeral. They tell him you've joined the celestial court, which sounds grand until you realize it's the same euphemism they used for the executed kitchen staff. The funerary priests preserve your body with such haste that they forget to replace your stolen intestines with the customary linen bundles. Even in death, you're left hollow. Historians still argue whether this systematic erasure was personal or just standard Ptolemaic housekeeping. Mainstream archaeology shows at least 14 monuments where your cartouches were recarved for others. But here's the poetic justice. Your vandalized statues became homes for nesting swallows, their droppings eventually weathering the stone into anonymity, nature's revenge on those who tamper with history. As the embalmers sew your gilded lips shut, one slips a scarab amulet into your wrappings, not the prescribed heart scarab, but a tiny figure of Isis. It's the first act of true devotion you've received in years. Outside, the Nile continues its indifferent flow, carrying the news of your death to places where your name might still be spoken aloud. Somewhere beyond Memphis, a woman who remembers your kindness lights a lamp in her window. The flame gutters but doesn't go out. 2 millennia later, a French archaeologist's brush uncovers a single faience bead with your name in the delta mud. Then a scrap of papyrus mentioning the king's daughter-wife. Piece by piece, the desert surrenders your story. Not the sanitized version chiseled into temple walls, but the truth whispered in workers' quarters and scribbled in margin notes. Your face emerges from the shadows of history, not as a monstrous footnote, but as a woman who navigated impossible waters with whatever oars she could grasp. Modern scholars pore over your remains with CT scanners instead of chisels. They find the arthritis in your hips from years of tension, the faint traces of henna in your hair, the oddly empty abdominal cavity that shouldn't be. The same Nile that carried your funeral barge now laps at excavation sites, as if impatient to reveal more. Schoolchildren memorize your name not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that survival leaves its own kind of legacy. Historians still argue about your final resting place, but the wind knows. It rustles through the reeds at Saqqara, where your looted tomb may lie, carrying whispers of a queen who refused to disappear. The moon silvering the desert sands mirrors the sheen of your stolen funerary mask. Somewhere, a swallow nests in the hollow eye socket of your defaced statue. The cycle continues. The Nile's twilight glow fades to indigo as the last echoes of Arsinoe's story settle into the sand. History, like the river, carries both the grand and the grotesque in its currents, but it also remembers in its own way. The stars above Egypt are the same ones that watched her struggles, their light reaching us long after the players have left the stage. Breathe deep the scent of lotus blossoms and baked earth. Let the weight of ancient stone sink into your bones, not as a burden, but as a reminder. Even the silenced find voices across centuries. The night embraces pharaohs and slaves alike now, its darkness softening the sharp edges of the past. As sleep pulls you under, imagine the river's gentle murmur, not a lament but a lullaby. The sand will keep its secrets until morning. Rest,